Democrats are meeting in Philadelphia this week for a retreat to focus on their policy agenda ahead of the midterms. The conference was supposed to start Wednesday, but it got pushed back after some Democrats objected to President Biden's COVID relief plan in the latest government funding package. For more, let's bring in my colleague, CBS News congressional reporter Zak Hudak. He is live at the retreat in Philadelphia. Zak, we both witnessed this breakdown in real time yesterday. Democrats thought they had a deal on a massive spending package. Instead, they encountered a lot of resistance from some of their own, particularly on this issue of COVID funding, which ultimately got cut from the final package. What happened, and is this a sign of bigger issues within the House Democratic caucus?
Nicole, what we had was an omnibus bill that has been worked on for months and months and months. We can remember mid last year talks about this package that was nearly complete, and the Biden administration came to congressional leadership and said, we need new COVID funding in here. We are running out of the preparedness funds and running out of funds that we'll need to help vaccinate the rest of the world in order to eventually, hopefully, bring the pandemic to some sort of an end. And Congress then said, okay, well, we need to find a way to pay for this. Republicans in the Senate were particularly concerned about that, and the route they liked for it was to take back COVID funds that had been given to some states in a partial basis. They were given half up front and half down the line. So the funds that had not been given to them yet and therefore not been used, Congress would withhold and use to fund this new COVID relief bill that was attached to the omnibus. Now, members of Congress from those states heard that was going to happen and said, wait a minute, our state legislatures have plans for this funding. We have vaccine rollouts, we have testing plans, we have economic relief, various measures that this is going to completely ruin our budget. So within the Democratic Party, we had sort of a little bit of a mutiny where some members said, look, we were not involved in this negotiation, and we will vote against this bill. That's what we heard from the progressive chair, Pramila Jayapal, who said, look, if we had been involved in these conversations from the beginning, none of this would have happened. We would have said, this isn't going to work for our states. But in the end, what we ended up with was the omnibus getting through, COVID being stripped out of it, and now Congress plans next week to vote on the COVID funds, and they're working out a plan of how to get everybody on board with that.
But is this a sign of a greater fracture within the party? Because we kind of saw something similar during some of those negotiations over Build Back Better.
It is another sign that the party is divided, Nicole, but I think it's also a sign of just how tight things are in Congress, particularly on Build Back Better. Part of the issue there is that because we have a 50-50 split in the Senate and Democrats can only afford to lose 3 votes in the House, that means that if you are a progressive or a extreme centrist within the Democratic Party, if you're on either end of the spectrum, you have majorly outsized power, way more power than you would typically have. So on some level, we're seeing these divides that exist always being magnified because the people sort of on the fringes have more power than they typically would. But that notwithstanding, there's no question that that's on top of mind for members here in Philadelphia and on top of mind for voters who have heard about repeatedly the Build Back Better plan and these other key portions of President Biden's agenda that, despite having control, albeit very narrow control, Democrats have been unable to get done so far.
So now that they have a full day in Philadelphia under their belt, how are Democrats trying to reset and move forward?
Nicole, they are talking about everything from cryptocurrency to immigration to combating inflation and explaining to voters why gas prices might be going up as we sanction Russia in order to try to avoid funding the conflict going on in Ukraine. So there's a lot being talked about here, but I think one of the key elements is looking forward to midterms. What is in store for Democrats? There are several more Democrats retiring from the House than Republicans, and that's a concern on mind of leadership and rank and file folks who do not want to lose the majority in the House or in the Senate, but particularly in the House where they have a few extra members right now. We heard from Sean Patrick Maloney earlier today, who's the chair of the DCCC, the major fundraising arm of the House Democrats, and he said there are actually some bright spots that maybe have been underreported here. Among them, he said he thinks that Democrats actually fared better in redistricting this year than in the previous maps, which they won with those previous maps. He also said that the DCCC is out fundraising the NRC, and that's a positive for Democrats. But despite that, on the super PAC level, Republicans are doing better. In other words, there's a lot of concern right now and a lot of talk for Democrats about losing the House and explaining to voters why there's inflation and why gas prices might actually go up more as the situation unfolds in Ukraine.
And we know Democrats will be hearing from President Biden tomorrow, so I'm sure more of those topics will be raised as well. Zak Hudak, thanks as always.
Thank you, Nicole.